going on, guys? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting with Cameron Selby, and we're going to be talking about the NFL playoffs and kind of just like looking at all these first 6 games and then predicting the rest of the playoffs. After this first week, we'll obviously do a recap video for this stuff, but we're just looking at, these 6 games, and then we're going to show y'all our full predictions, looking at every game for the rest of the playoffs, and also showing y'all kind of NFL's the only league that does the seeding correctly, in my opinion. So basically, they take the last place team and they take the lowest seeded team and place them against the highest seeded team in every single round, which makes it a lot of fun. So we will get into that and talk about just all these different things.
I mean, deserving so, and even if it's a parity-driven league, we've seen one seeds upset several times, probably just as much, if not more, than others that don't do this. Way of doing things. But just if you're the 2 seed and the 1 seed is upset and the 8, why does the 4 seed get to benefit and play the 8 when you have to play the 3?
College football.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like you said, every single playoff is like that. At least in football and basketball. I'm not as aware in MLB and NHL, but I've to my baseball buddies have time and time again complained about just the ignorant fandom of why things logically are the way they are.
Right.
Maybe it's starting to change, but who knows? But yeah, a whole lot of fun. But real quick before we even dive into it, we're going to kind of go a little quick tidbit of how our regular season predictions went. Obviously, if you watch our videos, live streams, we go through and we picked every single game head to head, and we also picked our 5 favorite spreads each week for a total of 90 games in an 18-week season. And you mopped the floor with me. You killed it. I actually hate, even though it's a pretty solid record, always want to get to 50% against the spread, which I got exactly 50. And then the pick'em record, looks respectable, but that might be the worst year I've ever had doing it. A lot of it had to do with so many 10-point plus favorites lost early in the season.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then me trying to force hey, upsets will happen, and then all of a sudden it just got really chalky, and then everybody was just picking favorites, and I'm just like, well, I'm trailing now. I have to figure out a way to get catch up with you guys, and it just never even ended up happening.
No, looking at those, I kind of like getting to 70% on pick'ems. So right now I feel like I even underdid it a little bit, but my against the spread I'm very confident in, because if you go over 50%, you're making money, and at 64%, I'm really happy with that. I was actually kind of surprised when we pulled this up that it was so high. If you get to 60%, you're making a lot of money throughout the year, though. So
exactly, and I mean, that's us doing our favorite 5. But just imagine if we did our favorite 3, and we just did 2 or 3 leg,
right?
Or Robin plays our fellow GTD member Dusty likes to do with spreads and whatnot. It just would have been even higher than that. So yeah, kudos to you for killing it this year. I mean, your against the spread almost outperformed your overall percentage for your pick'ems, which is very, very rare if that ever even comes close to happening.
Yeah, I guess I did pretty well picking dogs is one of the big things that I did right. So when you pick a dog, you normally put them in your spread picks because they have the plus money. So those are the guys that really save my spreads. But let's go on. Let's talk about this fun slate of the week. Whoa, where's my thing at? There she is. Going over to the first game, got the Chargers and the Texans. I actually went to the Texans game this last weekend. That's why we're actually recording this. Actually, no, we're recording this on time. We did not record the college football recap when we were supposed to, but that was because I was in Tennessee, watched the Houston game versus Tennessee. It was cold. It was raining. It was disgusting. And it was 29 degrees while we were there in the stadium.
How many Oilers jerseys were surrounding you? I know they were doing the Love You Blue because they like to kind of poke fun at the Houston fandom,
sides,
which it's Tennessee's uniforms, guys. Y'all didn't want to pay for a stadium, so they left.
Right.
That is the whole premise of why the Oilers are no longer a thing. But it is still fun to see the back and forth, and it kind of helps keep the rivalry alive. Even if they're not too competitive.
I actually really like the powder blues. I think they're cool. We should get. I also, of course, the Chargers have powder blues that I like on the other side. But yeah, it was a fun game to be there. We were in. So our row was in from the bottom. So we were only 13 rows up.
Yeah, I was
which was
shocked
really
by how
cool.
close you were.
And I got those tickets through my credit card, which my credit card had. I used to have an NFL credit card, and so I have like points, and I just wanted to go to this game because we went to one of my aunt has a place in Nashville, so we went, and I couldn't believe how close we were. But of course, it's week 18. There's no one in the stand. Our whole row was just me and Taylor.
Yeah.
So just me and my wife, and so it was really crazy. But Houston handled business. We both picked Tennessee, I believe, this week, and because we didn't expect Houston to play anybody,
Which they did for like a drive.
Yeah.
And
CJ played one drive, scored a touchdown through Tanico. Davis Mills comes in. It wasn't even that interesting. Will Levis's touchdown at the end of the game was just so dumb. Like, it was so ridiculous. Like, it was the most Will Levis thing I've ever seen.
Tennessee now moves on and has the number 1 pick, while Houston is now hosting a playoff game. Fun fact, every single time Houston has been in the playoffs in their entire history, it has been the first game on Saturday at 3:30. Every single time it has been the first game. For whatever reason, they love having Houston host the first game of the playoffs. This time going against the Chargers, who are actually favored on the road. Obviously a better record. Pretty close in terms of tell the tape between the two teams, but obviously the Chargers finished the season very strong, whereas Houston kind of backed in and also kind of had a lot of eye-opening bad performances, like Christmas Day against Baltimore. Like, I almost feel like ending the game with 2 points is almost worse than 0 points sometimes.
Yeah.
It just stands out so much more to me. But, give me your kind of first thoughts on this. Obviously, Houston, not the same team they started the season with. Chargers are a little bit healthier on the back end of things. But, give me your rundown of this game.
Well, in the last 3 games for the Chargers, they've actually had a pretty easy schedule. They did play Denver, and then they on Thursday Night Football, and they won 34-27, but then they beat New England by 33, beat the Raiders by 2 touchdowns. I just think they're playing really well. I'm on the Chargers side. I think they're better coached, right? Or Jim Harbaugh's a good coach. I think both actually have really good coaching staffs. But I'm expecting Justin Herbert to be the better quarterback in this game. He is. What was his record that he just got most recently? He broke the record for passing yards at age or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, he went off to a hot start to start his career because he basically came in his second game and just never gave the job back up.
Yeah,
which he should have started from the jump, but is what it is. The thing I've liked to see, at least from a fantasy or offensive perspective, that they were just kind of letting him just kind of ride things. And I know he was banged up early in the season, but lately he's just been slinging it and very efficiently, very well. And I mean, having over 350 yards this past game to get the 5 seed. Obviously Pittsburgh lost on the Saturday, and so you'd much rather go on the road to Houston, who's kind of back into the playoffs, compared to Baltimore.
Yeah, that would have sucked.
That would have been a whole lot worse. So, that was definitely worth playing for. I think it's a good game. But fun fact, the Chargers are tied for the league best at 12-5 against the spread this year. Being favored on the road, that's probably a good sign. These two teams, I don't believe they've played this year, but both really strong in terms of turnover margin, which I know is one of your favorite stats. Kind of really solid above average, both sides of the ball. But obviously Houston has the quarterback that hasn't been playing as well, whereas the Chargers, Justin Herbert's hitting his stride at the right time.
And I also think the Chargers defense is probably the most pivotal point of this game, in my personal opinion. As you can see, they are first in points allowed per game. Mm-hmm. And I think that continues. I think that they just I find it hard to think that Houston scores over 20 points. And that's kind of, if I don't think they're going to score 20 points, I think the Chargers will. And I think that they're going to win the game for that reason. If I had to pick the spread, that is a tough spread. That's like right where,
you
it's
never
gross.
Want to just straight up 3.
I'd go, let's take the Chargers. And, but
either way, yeah. I mean, we'll be picking every single game. We'll be live streaming right before main slates on probably Saturdays for the next couple of weeks during the playoffs, and we'll do how we've started before, which is we show the spreadsheet, our picks against the experts' picks, and instead of doing maybe 5 spread picks, we'll probably maybe condense it down to 3. I guarantee you this game won't be on there for either of us unless it gets bet down to 2.5, or bet up for that matter. Maybe if you're thinking of a closer game, but I'm kind of siding on the Chargers side. Like like you said, scoring wise, I think will be a really difficult issue for them. At least it's in a dome. It's one of the few games that are not cold weather affected this year. Obviously, a cold weather advisory is just hitting the country right now. Don't expect any games to have a significant impact on that, but being in a dome is always cool. Chargers hitting their stride at the right time, like I mentioned previously. Yeah, I would probably side with them pretty comfortably in this game.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's go on to the next one. Rivals, division rivals, Baltimore versus Pittsburgh here. -10 to Baltimore, and I get it. That's just such a big number.
That's massive.
But at the same time,
it's kind of warranted.
I
little bit.
can't deny that that's probably about right. Because of course Pittsburgh, good defense, as you can see, 8th in points per game, 12th in total yards. But they aren't doing anything offensively that gets me excited. They are really good in turnover margin, as you can see, +16 is second. But they're playing against Baltimore. You look at Baltimore's most recent games, they've won 4 in a row. They've scored over 30 points in all of them, and held everybody under 17. And Pittsburgh was week 16, 34-17 in that game. They did lose the first time. Right. But it doesn't matter because recently.
So that's what I was going to bring up, because you just said Baltimore kind of hitting their stride at the right time, 4 in a row, 30 points a game in every single one. Well, Pittsburgh has lost 4 in a row.
Yeah.
They have not scored 17 in any of the, or more than 17 in any of those games. So they're complete opposite directions, and on top of that, being on the road doesn't help. I don't like the spread at all. I would actually side with the Pittsburgh side just because it's a cold weather playoff game. Lamar, possible woes, because we faded him a couple times this season for DFS slates because this is the worst matchup for him. He has not ever performed well from a fantasy perspective against the Steelers. His best career game was this last one where they, won on Christmas Day, 34-17. And I mean, great numbers, fantastic, but 200 yards, didn't run for a ton.
Yeah.
So fantasy-wise, it's going to be hard to get to him because he'll probably be one of the more popular quarterbacks, being at home, being the biggest favorite on the weekend. Pittsburgh isn't showing me anything right now to say that they can keep up with them. And if they even score 17 points, I don't even know if Pittsburgh can even match that, which is scary.
Well, I mean, right now they're giving them 16.75, I guess, points. I'd take the under. It's just I don't feel confident enough in a team that's been playing so poorly. George Pickens had 1 reception for 0 yards.
I also had 0 yards this weekend. So
yeah, same. Yeah. It's just
that was pretty sad.
It's just I don't know how to get behind a team like this right now. And Baltimore's been great. So they could win. It wouldn't surprise anybody if they won by 4 touchdowns.
Right.
That's the thing. It's just
I
don't
see
see
this
that.
being a low-scoring, really low-scoring game or a blowout by the Baltimore Ravens. I don't see this as a 27-24 down to a field goal.
Right.
This is exactly what we saw on Christmas, where they just kind of run out and just don't look back. Or Pittsburgh doesn't score a touchdown but scores 6 field goals and beats them. That's how this game is going to kind of go. The way I see it. So, I would probably give Baltimore a touchdown advantage.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not touching that spread, but I think it's probably something along the lines of a 24-17-ish kind of game, maybe even less than that.
Give me 24-13. So I'll take
Fair.
I'll take the push.
Well, that would be a -10.
No, yeah, but give me the push because shit. I don't know how you pick it. But yeah, both on Baltimore. I don't think that that's surprising to anybody. They've looked really good. And so we'll go up to the next game, though. The last AFC game between Buffalo and Denver. Man, it's cold in Buffalo. It's going to be one of those weeks, too, where it's going to be real cold. And they've played really well. Of course, New England this last week didn't really count. They played all their backups. Mitchell Trubisky only had 101 passing yards, but before that, they won 3 in a row, including beating Detroit. They did lose a game to the Rams, though, at 44-42, which was a fun, insane game.
Right.
I just got to take Josh Allen, and of course, if this was Cincinnati, we'd have a completely different conversation. But this isn't Cincinnati. This is Denver.
I think the playoff. If you're a fan of playoff football, you really were hoping for some reason Carson Wentz and Kansas City to not lose by 38 points and find a way for Cincinnati to get in, because I might have even picked Cincinnati outright, and then you get Cincinnati versus Buffalo, and then the very next week, by default, because they'd be the 7th seed, Kansas City versus
Cincinnati. And then
it's just like that's my favorite 2 or 3 matchups in the entire NFL right now. Are those 3 quarterbacks going head to head against each other? But again, Denver, gotta give them credit. 10-7 after being the tie for the second lowest total to start the year. Every year there's a team that's a bottom 5 team or bottom 5 projected that kind of comes out of nowhere. We had a feeling we didn't put Denver all the way into the playoffs, but we were like, that's the easiest over to click on because we expected them to compete. But it's just like, man, AFC West, I don't think 3 teams can go. Well, sure enough, they all did. So, sorry about your Raiders. But, I mean, this was as much of a coach of the year moment as I could remember of a team, just nobody, no name defense outside of Pat Surtain, all this record-breaking dead money from Russell Wilson and the departure this past offseason, drafting a quarterback that they're just like, man, 6-year quarterback in college, I don't know, and it just worked to perfection for them. And so kudos to them for getting here. I don't know if I can even say that they can make this even a possible upset, but they've already way overachieved everybody's expectations. So even if they got blown out of the water, like, you got to give all the hats off to Denver.
Oh yeah, for sure. One thing I want to add, because you did say Cincinnati, they would play all these quarterbacks. Well, if Denver wins, they play Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and then most likely Lamar Jackson. That's
tough.
The gauntlet. That is an insane, and of course, that would be the best case for a Baltimore Ravens team, but like that's probably not going to happen. They're probably going to have to play Buffalo in the second round. We'll talk about that in a minute because we actually did a consensus GTD playoffs because we basically picked all the same teams.
Yeah.
But we did only one game that was different. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But this game, it's got to be Buffalo. Give me MVP, Josh. Let's see it.
Don't know how to get there. But again, I'd love to see upsets this weekend, but it's just kind of hard in this game environment. I just don't think this is the right time or right matchup for Denver to possibly just pull, even go beyond the expectations of what they've already exceeded.
For sure. Going to the next game, it's the first NFC game. I believe this one is on Sunday. Midday Sunday, right?
So this is the second of 3. Denver and Buffalo was the first one. This one, I believe, will be at 3:30, and then the following one we'll talk about in a second will be the night game for Sunday, and then one on Monday. But yeah, starting off, this is the Brazil matchup.
Yes.
That was a Week 1 matchup to start the year. Green Bay kind of backing in a little bit as well after some performances, but at the same time, there's injury concerns too because both Christian Watson done for the year towards ACL, which is not like he's the wide receiver 1 alpha that he makes that massive of a difference. But also Jordan Love getting kind of banged up, and they said he could have returned if it mattered, but it's like, why would you rather play Philly instead of, literally whether it was going to be Tampa Bay or the Rams?
Big difference.
Way different. It's similar to what we mentioned about the Chargers, how kudos to them because you don't want to play Baltimore right now. You'd much rather play Houston. Green Bay should have had the same mindset. And once again, they kind of let it down, lost on a walk-off field goal. Finally, Chicago converted on a game-winning field goal this year. It took 10 games, but
finally something went their way out of everything. That's finally beating Green Bay.
I mean, they did what they needed to do to get themselves into the playoffs before that, so it wasn't concerned. It was just basically they kind of got sucked into a matchup, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise because Philly now is kind of got a banged up situation where Jalen Hurts, as of this moment, is still in concussion protocol, which this was from 2 weeks ago. One would assume, based on doing math, he would be ready, but until he gets cleared and gets the practice in, you still kind of got to give the weight.
Right.
It might, you never know. So that was kind of one of the things that came out when I was talking or listening to Sports Talk today. It was just like, we're still waiting on the news. Practice is tomorrow. Like, what's happening? But I think they benefit because they get an extra day, obviously being on Sunday. But yeah, this should be another fun matchup. It was a lot of fun that Week 1, other than, the field conditions and whatever. But, aesthetically, it was a great back and forth offensive affair. Saquon went off. Jaden Reed went off. That's long since passed because they don't want to involve him in the offense anymore. But yeah, I like this game. Hopefully, it kind of comes down to the wire. 4.5 point favorite for Philly. Yeah, a lot of good spots. They're kind of above average on both sides of the ball. But Philly is the best in total defense this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see which kind of quarterback can overcome the really strong top 5 scoring or total defense.
Well, talking about total defense for Philly, it's a lot to do with their rookie tandem back there in Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, who have been awesome. Looking at just some things to talk about since the bye week in Week 5 for Philly, they have won. They've lost one game since the bye week. They've just been, and it was Washington, that 36-33 game that was crazy. Kenny Pickett was the starting quarterback in that game. With Jalen Hurts, though, starting, they have not lost since Week 4. They were 2-2 to start the year, and then,
Yeah, very rarely
Yeah,
do you
crazy.
end up as the 2 seed being 14-3, but there was a couple of other 14-2 teams that had to duke it out. It was
Oh, yeah.
crazy. Everybody kind of overachieved in the NFC this year. We expected probably 10 to 11 teams kind of competing,
Right.
but we didn't think that it would be like another 8-9 team is going to squeeze in, but we were like, hey, I think you're pretty good if you can get to 10 wins, and obviously nobody ended up with 10 wins and missing. Seattle ended up
did,
getting
yeah.
10, but they were mathematically eliminated before at 9-7.
Crazy.
So it's just kind of like it really blew everybody's expectations out of the water up top. So yeah, it's a really strong matchup. Who are you going with this one?
I'm picking the Eagles. But I did want to mention also the only just for another fun tidbit, 6 losses for Green Bay. They were 1-5 in the NFC North because they lost to the Chicago Bears. They lost both games to Minnesota and both games to Detroit, and then the only other loss they've had is Philly.
And
Like,
then
lots
if
of
it
good
weren't
teams.
for a blocked field goal, they might have lost all 6.
Yeah.
Because if you remember the Bears, one of the many mistakes by Matt Eberflus was just like, hey, we're going to settle on a 45-yarder.
Yeah,
Just
that was crazy.
timeouts and 35 seconds, but we're going to let it run off. But yeah, that's very telling because I don't know tiebreaker-wise who would have had the edge between Green Bay and Seattle at that point, being both 10-7. But yeah, I mean,
All games in the NFC, I think it would have had to been Seattle because that would have been 7 losses in the NFC. But yeah, just talking about this game, I'm picking.
That's fair.
I'm picking the Eagles. I'm expecting them to win by about a touchdown, so I will take the over for the Eagles. I think it's a close game, of course, but I'm going to take Saquon. Can't go against him. I expect Jalen Hurts to play, and then give me the Eagles defense because holy crap, they're good.
So yeah, like you said, we have one pick difference, so the entire first round is kind of going to be similar.
Yeah.
But hypothetically, say Jalen Hurts is out, and there's a bombshell, and all of a sudden you're relying on Tanner McKee or Kenny Pickett. Are you still riding with Philly, or are you going to jump ship?
No, I'm riding with Philly.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, it's not even a question in my mind, actually.
I'm really trying to have a debate. I really.
Remember when Kenny Pickett put 41 up on Dallas?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. Give me even with Kenny Pickett. Lean on Saquon. Just
Again,
it is what it is.
3-touchdown hat trick. Again in Brazil against these very Packers. Packers against really strong teams. They kind of
Have a
can't
hard time.
really stop
Yep.
the run. So that's kind of what we're kind of banking on, especially an extra week of rest for most of the skill players for Philly. Obviously, A.J. Brown, Saquon, Hurts. Even if he was healthy, he would have sat out as well. And Devontae Smith. The one person I did want to mention, Dallas Goedert, did play because he was coming off IR. They peppered him a ton at the beginning of that game, and he looked pretty good. And then they were like, all right, you're ready for the playoffs now. So another guy worth mentioning. But yeah, let's go with the Eagles and proceed to the next game.
We picked all the same on the first 6 games, guys. So it's all the same here. This game is, you see the better record for Washington over there, 12-5. You see the 10-7 on the other side. Tampa Bay -3. And Tampa Bay offensively has just been really, really good, while Washington has looked a lot worse in recent weeks. So I think that this is probably one of the harder games to pick out of the first 6, obviously. But I want to hear what you have to say about just these 2 teams and then also who you're picking.
Yeah, I mean, both of them finished the season strong. Washington won 5 straight to end the year. Tampa Bay won 6 of 7. Their one loss was a close one to Dallas. That is what it is. Like, I know Dallas didn't make the playoffs, but Dallas beat good teams as well. So you can't just poo-poo just like significant, or like that's a significant deal that they couldn't win 7 straight. But yeah, they had to run the table to make the playoffs because Atlanta swept them, and they did just very that. Baker has been awesome this year. It's been awesome to watch him resurge and once again capitalize off of finishing the year strong last year, because if you remember, they had Detroit on the ropes, and it came down to a back and forth affair that he ended up throwing a pick to seal the game, but they were riding that thing, and Detroit very well could have, and so on and so forth. So
for sure.
Washington, another team kind of similar to Denver, like we mentioned, very much overachieved. I said at the very beginning of the season, if there was a team that was not going to be picked for the favorite, if you were going to talk about NFC, Washington was the best bet at 10-1, and again, didn't put him in the playoffs. I think I had him a game outside. But yeah, Washington just kind of blew everybody out of the water because we didn't expect this much instant success.
Yeah, for sure.
Both on the offensive and defensive side.
I remember during we were going back and forth on who was going to win the NFC South, and I was like, honestly, I like Tampa Bay, and you were like, I don't think you told me this, and I remember this pretty vividly. I don't think you're giving enough credit to Atlanta. And I was like, okay, fair. I mean, they have the better roster when you look top to bottom. But Tampa Bay is I just feel like they're fighters. Like, they're gritty. They just, know how to win when it matters. And then, of course, they've done a pretty good job of giving supporting cast to Baker Mayfield. We didn't expect Bucky Irving to be as good as he's been. I think it's a great two-headed monster. I think he needs I think he needs Rachaad White back there. But I think that, Bucky Irving, Kate Otten, Jalen McMillan, and of course Mike Evans is a big thing. But just like getting all those key pieces, they've just looked so good.
And my thing is, it's not. And usually when you're in the worst division in football, which probably is the NFC South still,
right.
Maybe not be the following year because Carolina kind of came up a little bit. Atlanta at least was okay.
Should be good.
Should be better, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, regardless, we thought people would overachieve because all of them were the easiest strength of schedules. But it was just like, you're going to win all the easy games and then you're going to lose all the tough games. Well, Tampa Bay has a very good resume. They also met week 1 of the season, and Tampa Bay won by 17. Tampa Bay also beat Detroit on the road, one of their 2 losses on the entire season. They also beat Philly by 17 before Philly's bye, and they went on a run. They also were really close with Baltimore. That was the game that Chris Godwin went down. Kind of went down to the wire again with Patrick Mahomes. San Francisco was a close loss, but then they destroyed the Chargers a couple weeks ago by 23.
That was crazy. I remember
And, obviously some of their division games are close. Is what it is. This the NFL. You're not going to blow out every single team that you're supposed to be favored against. But yeah, they have a really strong resume as, a 10-7 team, which you don't really usually see.
Yeah. So both picking Tampa Bay -3. I guess so.
This is my toughest game on the entire weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Because
obviously it comes down to this one or the next one we're about to talk about. I feel a little nervous just because usually turnover margin is a very telling stat. They are by far the worst playoff team in terms of turnover margin. The only one that is a negative that made the playoffs. A lot of that had to do with early regular season struggles.
Right, for sure.
Tampa Bay, they're just scoring a lot. This is the highest total in the entire weekend, so expect some points. It's just kind of trusting one quarterback over the other, but I'm not surprised if Jaden Daniels kind of comes through.
Yeah, no, that was that's the biggest question. Do you trust Jaden Daniels enough? I mean, they're 12-5, but they just happened to end the season poorly compared to where they were at the beginning of the year. You were like, oh wow, this team is.
And the win losses are there, but it's just kind of some lulls, and then another. Obviously the Dallas game, like that was a big difference because that could have been the 7 seed against Philly.
Right.
And I was surprised. I guess Jaden Daniels had some kind of minor thing that they pulled him in the second half, but it's just kind of like you also need to try to win this game, and they did with 2 seconds left, and that's what that coupled with the game-winning field goal is what swapped the matchups, because otherwise they would have had to play Philly on the road for the 3rd time. They really struggled both games against Philly, so that's just kind of one of those things that they set themselves in at least a better position. But you just kind of want to see which team that's riding high from a win-loss perspective is just going to keep on going.
For sure. So let's go to the last game. We both felt the same way on this one also. I thought it was a good, like, Pick'em is the perfect thing for this game in my personal opinion. This is a fun game. I'm excited. I love the Rams as a team. I think that they have a really fun, like, I think Sean McVay is really good, first off. And then second off, Matthew Stafford with all three of his weapons that are out there. Defensively, you've got the young guys and Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, and then they've just been playing well. So I get excited about this team. Of course, you look at the stats, it's not as exciting, but shoot, they're the team that, I think that they're a slept-on team in the playoffs. While the Vikings, they just had to play for their lives, and Sam Darnold couldn't hit the freaking on the 5-yard line the whole game. Basically, it felt like couldn't get the ball to Justin Jefferson, couldn't get the ball to Jordan Addison on the out route, nowhere. So, and he missed Jordan Addison earlier in that play.
This kind of comes down to tell the two teams. Like Minnesota, if we did a power ranking last week, they might have been number one again. They might have been, man. Because Detroit was just kind of like, hey, they're just decimated.
Yeah,
like,
they are.
They finally lost the second time. Minnesota just keeps on winning, and then number one, this and that and the other. Sam Darnold, he had a great start to the season, kind of like he's doing fine, and then just all of a sudden, maybe he's a top 5 MVP candidate out of nowhere, and just we saw one of the biggest, most profile games because one was going to be the 1 seed with the bye, and one was going to be the 5 seed having to go on the road the entire playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's some of the biggest stakes you can have for a regular season game on Sunday night. I actually picked Minnesota to win the game because I was like, Minnesota just looks too good on both sides. But then you got to factor in hey, this is the biggest game of your life. Can you come through? And Sam Darnold hasn't had many of these games.
Right.
And obviously it showed, which is unfortunate because they're a 14-3 team now having to go on the road. And, man, I just don't think I can ride with them in this game.
I agree. I'm going to be picking the Rams. I really like what they were able to do with these. We actually kind of talked a little mess on them for how they did free agency. Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard. Oh, how are those two guys going to replace what they had before in Daniel Hunter and things like that? Well, sorry, I did not know Van Ginkel's game, man. I mean, geez Louise. So, I mean, they have players. They've played well. Byron Murphy, a guy I really liked when he came out of college, went to a bad situation in Arizona, has resurgence this year, and so
yeah, they just can't pick first-round corners, but they can pick you off the street.
We'll just go
and
exactly.
Save you. But that also is a kudos to Brian Flores, who kind of flamed out a little bit in Miami. Then there was the controversy with being a player coach or not. But yeah, he's had a resurgence. And then Kevin O'Connell is one of my favorite young coaches in this league. I mean, I actually don't know who's favored between being the coach of the year between him and Sean Payton. But man, both of them. Can you give 2 trophies?
Yeah.
Because both of them have done phenomenal jobs. But the Rams, though, they finished this season so strong. Buffalo was riding hot.
Finally healthy.
Buffalo was riding hot, and the problem with the Rams all year, if you look at their points per game, has been scoring. Like, they're one of the few teams in this entire playoffs that are bottom. They're not even in the they're at 20th, but everybody else is, closer to top 10.
Yeah.
And they're riding at 21.6 points per game, and it's like, can you score? And then going against Buffalo, dropping 44 on them. And then the following 3 games, which, again, non-playoff teams, but holding San Francisco, the Jets, and the Cardinals all below 10 points, when your problem also has been defense. I thought that was a big step as well. And when Minnesota, basically Aaron Glenn in Detroit was just like, we are just sending Engage 8 on you the entire game. See what you can do. And they just could not protect him.
Mm-hmm.
They could not stop them. And then Sam Darnold got so rattled that he's missing easy routine throws. So if the Rams are able to kind of keep that defensive momentum, I just kind of have a hard time seeing this. I think this is a very strong, aesthetically pleasing game where there's defensive flashes, there's offensive flashes, but I think right now the Rams are just kind of in a better spot.
I think and this is something that we have to kind of unfortunate. It's an unfortunate thing, but Christian Darrisaw, when he went out, that was when I was like, I don't know that the Vikings can do it. And then they won a bunch of games. Don't get me wrong; they kept winning, but they haven't been able to protect Sam Darnold as much, and that's kind of the biggest issue because Jared Verse is coming.
Yeah,
I love the Rams' defensive line right now, and so I just have a hard time thinking that you're going to protect Sam Darnold. You're going to get the running game going. Aaron Jones has looked good, but I just don't know. And so give me the Rams. Give me the time of the year.
This just kind of comes down to which quarterback do you trust more, and Matthew Stafford has been there.
Yeah,
and he used to be that guy that was just like, hey, he hasn't been in the playoffs, but he's really good. But what's going to happen when it counts? And then he finally went to a situation where you're a contender and wins in his first year. Obviously, last year they lose 1 point game against Detroit. No shame in that because Detroit was really good, and it was back and forth. And this year they started the year losing in overtime to Detroit. So it's a whole lot of things where they're just really close. I think they're probably they're one of the least talented overall rosters, but they just kind of mesh so well together that I just think they're as dangerous as anybody right now.
Absolutely. Going on to the next thing, we're going to look at our playoff. And, of course, this is Cameron's edition because we have one team different.
Yeah.
And
extra work because of one different
game. Yeah.
But, obviously first round we talked about the Chargers going over the Texans, Ravens winning the third matchup against the Steelers, and then the Bills kind of cruising against Denver. That sets up a basically 1-5, a third rematch with the Chiefs and Chargers. That's always a fun game. I just kind of think it comes down to, man, the Chiefs having the week off, basically a couple weeks off because they've been cruising since Christmas. And, man, they're just gonna do it. I just don't know how anybody can choose any differently. Obviously, they're the favorites, but I feel like nobody wants to convince themselves that they should be. That's kind of how when we did our preseason predictions, we did, Kansas City versus Detroit in the Super Bowl. They were the two of the three, or they should have been two of the three biggest favorites. They were 1 and 2 in our power rankings respectively. And it's just like Kansas City hasn't looked like the best team all year, but they're just going to keep winning in all 50,000 different ways you can win a football game. And it could be controversial. It could not be. It could be annoying to watch every single time because they're primetime television every single game that they play.
Right.
But it's just, I have the vibes that I just don't think anybody can overcome that. But the difference between ours, I'm going with Baltimore reaching the AFC Championship game, which will be Lamar's first time doing so and winning multiple playoff games in a single postseason. The biggest thing is this is a rematch from middle of the season in October. Baltimore hosted Buffalo, and it's not that they beat them; it's the way they beat them.
Okay.
And how just hey, we're deciding showdown wise. We got to fade Lamar or Derek. What are we gonna do? Let's fade Derek because
right.
Buffalo, and then first play 80-yard touchdown. Oh, that's how it's gonna be, and it just kept on happening.
Yeah.
Buffalo's really kind of been susceptible to good offenses this year. Obviously, we talked earlier when the Rams put up 44 on them, and then a couple of other occasions where Baltimore drops 35 on them, and it wasn't close. And they took their foot off the gas. And I believe their backup played as well in that game, which is just kind of like the ultimate stink face when it's an elite primetime game and you got backup quarterbacks playing in the game. That should be a thing. I just think Baltimore defensively has been the problem all season long, but the last month they've looked really, really good defensively.
They have, yeah. Can't deny that.
Buffalo, they're really good too. This probably will be a pick'em to me.
Yeah, I think
maybe a
it's
slight
close.
lean to Buffalo is like maybe -1. Either way, it should be much closer than the middle of the season. But I know it's hard to beat a team twice, but just the way they did it, I just don't know if Buffalo can kind of stop that style.
So I have my side of it.
Yours.
Here we go. Check this out. I already did it. So this is mine. Everything's the same, but number 2, Buffalo. The reasons. So this game was played September 29th. So that was like, I don't know, 4 months ago. It's a long time ago. And so I think that obviously these are new teams. These are completely different teams. one thing that I do want to say is it was in Baltimore. And Baltimore's biggest issue is not this regular season. Every year they do fine in the regular, they do great in the regular season, but then they choke in the playoffs at least once, sooner or later. Buffalo's a team that makes teams choke. That's how I feel. They get to that point, and you're like, holy shit, like Buffalo's good. Like they're kicking their ass. It's cold. It's freaking in Buffalo. So another thing, Buffalo. This is one of my biggest takes. Buffalo is not good on the road. They are 8-0 at home, though. And I think that really plays into this game. Being at home, that weather, and of course, Baltimore's cold. I'm not saying that. Lamar's going to sooner or later choke. I just think all of the things added up and the fact that they're playing a second game, they got embarrassed. Teams don't like that, after that happens, they're not okay with that. They come back with that vengeance. Give me Buffalo to win. Give me Josh Allen as MVP over Lamar Jackson, runner-up for MVP, who's actually had his best season in his career, but I think Josh Allen deserves MVP over him because he is doing it without so much talent that all left.
No, I agree. I understand the points for that, and I can completely acknowledge if Buffalo does get back past the Ravens, I think they are the biggest threat to Kansas City not winning on either side of the bracket. In my opinion, I just think that not camaraderie, but they're able to beat the Chiefs in the regular season. Yeah. They've just come down to last-second losses. It's not like they're choking or like, hey, you're up 10 and you just gave it away. It's just last second, 13 seconds left, like overtime, coming down to the wire, one missed throw, and you just couldn't get over the hump. But they're beating them in the regular season. I believe they've won 3 or 4 against Kansas City, whereas Baltimore, they just have not. You haven't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And Lamar in the playoffs, it's staggering, the difference between regular season Lamar and playoff Lamar. And that would, to me, be such a big deal if, for some reason, some way, shape, or form, Lamar does win his 3rd MVP and he chokes again.
Against the other MVP candidate.
Exactly. Like I don't know how for anybody to defend that. He would turn into a James Harden-esque player.
Yeah.
Where you're just like elite numbers every single time. You're playing from ahead. Great conditions, great environment, great overall roster. Everything's in the moment. And then when it's on you, it just hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it won't, but I think that the reason that they win this game isn't because Lamar drops 4 touchdowns like he has been doing. It's because Derrick Henry gets the ball 35 times, drops $150, 2 touchdowns, and Buffalo just can't
stop.
Match.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the most fun game, and I expect it to happen. Like, no one is expecting Pittsburgh or Denver to win, as the spreads show. So we should get this game.
Right.
And it's going to be the game that everybody wants to watch. I will, play.
Divisional round, that will be the marquee game. That'll be probably the last game on night, prime time, all television. All eyes are watching, and I would definitely... I'm so looking forward to that game if indeed it happens. And I will eat my words if Lamar – I'm not trying to hedge in any way because I've always been, like, not a Lamar hater, but just, hey.
Right.
You're pointing out he's the number 1 or number 2 in the league, and yet you're ignoring the when it matters games.
Mm-hmm.
Where Josh Allen has been one of the best. He just hasn't beaten the best.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, like, I understand and completely would not be surprised if – Buffalo wins this game, but that's just kind of what it came down to for me.
Yep, and that was our only difference on both sides. So if you look at this next one, this is the GTD edition, because we actually think we already went through the first 3. It's 1 through 4, which is all the home teams win. Detroit plays the Rams. That is a rematch. That is going to be fun, but also Philly losing to Tampa Bay last year after their insane crumbling. So now Tampa Bay gets a second chance. I do believe Philly and Detroit will win. They are the better teams roster-wise, and they've played really well to end the season, as we talked about with the Minnesota game for Detroit. And then Philly's just been, even without Jalen Hurts, just beating teams by 30. So
similar to what I said about Buffalo having the best shot of dethroning Kansas City, I think that the best team that could dethrone Detroit is the Rams.
Yeah,
that comes in the divisional round. So that's going to be such a fun game. Obviously, again, came down to the wire last year. They met in the wild card round. Was it 24-23, if I if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
And then it was overtime loss, opener in Detroit. No shame in that kind of thing. Rams were decimated with injuries to start the season, so we thought they would be what San Francisco became, which is just, hey, we're not making the playoffs. We got seven linemen on IR. Like,
yeah, they had
and
nothing.
our best two receivers are gone. Like, they had nothing, and they turned it around. I just think, man, that's another game that I'm just looking forward to. And then Tampa Bay, Philly should win that game, but I am not shocked whatsoever if Tampa Bay pulled that out. Just similar to what they did last year when Philly was favored after backing into the playoffs, and it's just like there's no reason Tampa Bay should win, and it just was not close from the start. Obviously, Philly much better into the season this year, but, Jalen Hurts,
Yep.
can you do it? Tampa Bay, I feel like they're playing with, no matter every single game that they advance to, they're playing with there's nothing to lose because we shouldn't have been here for the second straight year. And because we've won our 4th straight division title and second without Tom Brady, and people are just still like, hey, kudos to you for getting there, but you're done after one game. And it's just like the just underdog mentality, I think, can maybe be a reason Philly might drop this one, but I'm not confident enough to actually pick them out.
Right. Well, with Tampa Bay, it's like they're the team that you can never count out. But they're also the team that'll lose by 30.
And again,
because they're just so unpredictable.
Yeah, I mentioned this initially. They beat Philly 33-16 earlier.
Yeah, and
I know that was a long
32-9 in the wild card last year.
So the 2 times that they've played them recently have not been close. And again, it's hard to beat a team twice, let alone 3 times.
Right.
But when the way that you beat somebody, it's just like, man, you just bad matchup. But again, this is a healthy Philly that is great on both sides of the ball. Tampa Bay has a lot of holes. They should not, for any reason, be competitive in this game, but they will be. And it might be actually to where, I'm kind of rooting for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, fair.
I don't want to be chalky. I don't want to pick every single home favorite in the bracket.
Yeah.
There's got to be a dog somewhere. But yeah, Tampa Bay. Oh,
that'd be fun. That'd be so fun.
I almost convinced myself to make you pick another slide.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, right. But no, I think that if you're going to pick, I actually do think one of these underdogs will win, either the Rams or Tampa Bay. I just can't force myself to pick one naturally, if that makes sense. Like, one of them I'm comfortable, would say one of them would win. I'm actually, funny enough, I side with the Rams over Detroit because the Rams pose an issue for how Detroit wants to play football because they just have the firepower. They have the solid D-line. If David Montgomery's not there, we might have a different conversation because I don't know the Jahmyr Gibbs. And, of course, he looked great. But by himself, with Craig Reynolds, I'm more confident in this Rams defense. If David Montgomery's there, I'm a little I'll be honest. David Montgomery, his style of running is very good against a team like the Rams. But stopping the Rams, good luck. Good luck stopping the Rams. And, of course, the same can be said for Detroit, but I digress. It's a game that those 2 games are going to be awesome. And
let's say hypothetically the Rams do pull it out against Detroit, and it is Philly. Who would you go in that game?
Oh, that's fun too. I'm not confident in Jalen Hurts, and that's the first game where I'm like, Jalen Hurts is playing a better quarterback. I love Baker, but truly, there's a way more talent on Philly. Mm-hmm. I can make a case that the Rams have enough talent everywhere else that it comes down to quarterback. And I would.
When I started thinking about the playoff scenarios and brackets, because it's almost impossible from a week-to-week basis because so many upsets happen all the time.
Right.
But a couple weeks ago, I'm just like if-then statements to and I was like, the Rams, I think they'll pull off the 3 because I didn't expect Seattle to be knocked out.
Early
because of opponent records and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, then the Rams are going to play in Week 18 and win, and then they're going to be the 3 seed. And then I was like, I might pick them to go all the way. That's how I was kind of siding with it.
Yeah, if
and
they didn't have to play Detroit.
Because Seattle was eliminated before Week 18, they rested their starters, almost won, but we're like, hey, I don't care who we play between the Vikings and the Commanders, which maybe you should. But at the same time, I would pick them in both of those games. And if they were the 3, I would have picked them over Philly.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I definitely what I said about them being the biggest threat to Detroit. I might have just gone that route. I really might have.
But so I love the Rams. It's really hard for me to be like they're going to beat three teams that have a combined losses of 8.
Yeah,
You know, like
that's hard.
like
That is really
as
hard.
much as I think they will lose sooner or later. It could even be against the Vikings because all three of these teams that they're playing are good, but I just think they pose a lot of issues for these teams, and that's why I think that they could win. I don't think they can beat Detroit at the end of the day. I think Detroit has too much, but if I had to pick between these two teams, I think they have a better chance of beating Detroit than I think Tampa has beating Philly.
But at the same time, sometimes Detroit, they are the, let your nuts hang, go for it.
Do something
when
stupid.
you don't need to
Yeah.
all the time for no reason. And that is exactly why they didn't go to the Super Bowl last year.
Right.
Because they were like, hey, we don't want to go up 3 scores. We're going to go for it just because we believe. And it's like sometimes that doesn't work out. And literally that moment from it could have been a 17-point game to no, it's down 14. Oh, big lucky play. Oh, San Francisco only down 7 at home.
Yeah.
They just need one more stop. That's how quickly it turns. That's why you need to make those decisions of like, hey, man, I love the aggression every player's bought in, but
Right.
sometimes I need to control the emotion of it. And Detroit, even though they have been top our power rankings for the majority of the year and in preseason, they still haven't been there.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
to a Super Bowl before. And they still have to go over that mental hurdle of, we are the favorites. We're the ones being hunted. Last year, they were we have nothing to lose. We should have been in the title game. We were 7-point dog against the Niners. We're on the road. And then they're up, and then they ended up letting it go. But this year, they're going to be favored in every single playoff game, no matter how far they advance. Can you be the hunted and still come through? That's what I think is the biggest question of this entire postseason for me.
Currently plus 280 to win the Super Bowl, and then the Chiefs are
odds.
plus 350.
No.
Both bad. I would much rather take one of these plus 600, Baltimore or Buffalo, and then I'd even go farther to look at some of these other teams. Philly's plus 700. Yeah. I mean, Detroit's very good, talented-wise, but I'm going to just side with the fact that, it's they're going to play Kansas City. If they go to this is what we're going to talk about, the Super Bowl itself. I'm picking Kansas City because they've been there. They have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and I don't care about them winning by some bullshit in October or November because what they do in the playoffs is way different than some game that mattered but didn't matter to help them get the 1 seed kind of. You know what I mean?
Every Super Bowl victory that Patrick Mahomes has, and he has 3, he has been trailing by double digits in the second half of that game.
Yeah.
He found a way to
Does
win.
not matter.
It doesn't matter if it was ugly. He could have just been lights out and just found a way to come back. But this year, all year, fantasy-wise, like that's how we got to separate sometimes. Fantasy-wise, it doesn't matter if you're QB 15. Like, you're making plays when they matter every single time. And so anytime you were down 3 or down 2 or you can go either take the lead or tie it, every single time I'm going to bet on him.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm wrong 1 out of 12 times, I'm still very profitable, So that's just kind of what it comes down to for me. It's just like, I don't believe in anybody being able to stop them from doing themselves if they have the ball on a go-ahead. If this is like, hey, they just couldn't come back because you put up 28 on them and maybe it's not going to be another 28-3 comeback, a la 9 years ago at this point. But, I mean, even if you're down 3 scores, like, I don't have faith in any team to hold them off from doing what they usually do, which is going to be very frustrating to a lot of fans because if they hold a banner and they're the first team to ever three-peat in the NFL from a Super Bowl perspective, nobody's going to be happy and really appreciate how hard that is to do.
Right.
And even though they ended up being 15-2, but they were 15-1.
We hated Tom Brady.
And they're barely beating the Raiders, and then they're barely beating the Panthers and these teams, and it's just like they don't look good. It doesn't matter. They're getting it done.
Yep.
And you never had a single doubt that it was going to happen. And you're just annoyed when it does.
Yeah. The problem is, how do you bet against it?
No.
Because I can't. I just can't.
Now, I'm not saying to take that 350 and run with it.
No.
But all I'm saying is, man, when it comes down to it, I can't pick a single other team right now, and so I'm going to ride with history
Yeah.
being made.
When we've talked about it all year, my thing, and I've told people this, and I'm very adamant about this. So if you want to take a hard tick, whatever, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback of all time. And I'm not saying he's the GOAT. I'm not saying he's Tom. He has the same legacy as like Tom Brady, but his arm talent, and then also his ability to win when it matters. Yeah. He is my favorite quarterback. He's the best quarterback of all time. You can hate him all you want.
The thing that not many people, when they do GOAT debates and top tens and all time lists and stuff, no one separates the word best from great.
Right, for sure.
That's two different words. Greatest is accomplishments. Best is talent.
Yes.
Tom Brady is not a top 5 talent at the position of all time.
Hell no. Greatest.
But he is the greatest and might not ever be eclipsed because he did something unprecedented that he basically doubled the next best in terms of Super Bowl appearances, production, numbers. He has the longevity. He has the peak. All that.
He also had the cards stacked against him because he was a later round draft pick.
Exactly.
And things that you have to also take, like Patrick Mahomes got traded up for, and he was talented.
Yep.
And we saw the talent when he came out of college. Tom Brady was not that guy. And we, of course, know how that went. Drew Bledsoe gets injured. He takes over, and that's history. But
and I know he was traded up for, but nobody liked the move when
I
the
agree.
Chiefs traded up because they still had Alex Smith. Back-to-back divisional round exits.
Yeah.
They were good, really good, top 5 team every year in the AFC. And they trade up for a guy that people were just like, Texas Tech, quarterback, Big 12, doesn't pan out. Trade up 17 spots. Well, they trade up with those very Buffalo Bills that they keep on beating at the very end when it matters most.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes just the greatest thing ever. Or the best thing ever.
Right.
But yeah, that's something fun. Obviously, like I said, the public fan is not going to love it if the chalky Chiefs end up winning the Super Bowl. But just even if you are annoyed because you're rooting against them because you want somebody different or you want the dog to win or your team, it doesn't matter. At least have the wherewithal to appreciate
what they did.
The precedent.
Yeah.
Because that might not ever happen in our lifetime again because it took 58 attempts for it to happen. It's happened 7 other times where people have been exited in the playoffs, championship. One team got there, I believe, and it just has not happened. And so getting there is one thing, but winning it is just such a historical thing to just appreciate that moment for what it is.
If you don't appreciate it for Travis Kelce because you're annoyed by Taylor Swift or Patrick Mahomes, there's a guy that I would love to appreciate it for. Andy Reid, who absolutely has done a great job. I appreciate it for guys like Chris Jones, who go to work every day and hold down the fort.
For D-Hop, who's been stuck with Houston and Arizona.
For sure.
Several other guys. I mean,
the interior offensive line, love them guys.
Creed Humphrey.
Yeah, he absolutely does. Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, those guys deserve it. Yep. So
I wish we had a podcast a couple years ago because we were way early on those guys as well when we always did our draft talks and whatnot. But yeah, that's our 2025 NFL playoff predictions. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Please leave a like, comment. What's your Super Bowl prediction? What is your biggest threat to the Chiefs, or are you picking them outright? Who are you rooting for, or who are you rooting against? Well, we know that answer. But, I mean, yeah, we want to interact and let y'all let us know what you guys think.
For sure. Now, we really enjoy doing these videos and getting to predict these things and talk with y'all, but the best part is when y'all actually tell us how y'all feel, because we'd love to know, like, if you're like, oh, I agree, the Rams are a super big issue for these teams.
Or are we just talking out of our ass?
Or
they're just going to lose in the first round to the Vikings, and it's just like,
yeah,
oh well,
it's possible.
Yeah.
And then of course, is Tampa Bay gonna upset Philly for fun? Why not?
Oh man.
But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Tell us who y'all think is gonna win the Buffalo-Baltimore game, so we can get some more votes, because obviously we're split at the table, and it's gonna be a great game, one of the best games we'll probably see this year. And yeah, we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. So see y'all next time.
Have a good one, guys.